In Russia, more than 1,000 protesters were arrested today, but it's evidence of the Putin government's frustration with a growing anti-corruption movement.
Alexander Sorokin, the head of the Russian Union of Industrialists and Entrepreneurs, or the RSPP for short, or as it's nicknamed in more Western spheres of influence, the Oligarchs trade union, has come out recently stating that Russia is in very big trouble. He has stated that Russia is at the beginning of an uncontrollable contraction in the economy. In simple terms, the Russian economy is facing extreme turmoil due to the many events that are linked to the Ukrainian war. This statement has taken many of them out of sync with Putin's message that Russia will be able to get a handle on the situation and likely puts a target on them. However, they are not alone in their statement, meaning a direct target would be harder to pinpoint as there is strength in numbers. While the message of growing economic hardship has been repeated throughout the years since the start of the Ukrainian war, things have gotten so bad now that many are saying it all at once, leaving the Kremlin with little they can do to stop the talk from stopping. While most oligarchs were silent in response to Putin's invasion of Ukraine, many spoke out early on, as then US President Biden's administration had targeted the country with sanctions that damaged their business interests severely. Not only did they privately try to dissuade Putin to end the war or conclude it swiftly, they would also publicly condemn the situation to try and save face with their global public. As the war persisted, they become fewer in numbers until recently, as discontent has become impossible to hide due to the state of the economy and the crisis the country finds itself in. Despite their efforts, most Russian oligarchs were not shown favor or mercy as they were hit with the brunt of the majority of sanctions by the United States. In some instances, like those in EU territories at the time of the war's start, they would actually end up having their assets seized or frozen in many instances, hurting them in many instances beyond recovery. Specifically, there were multiple instances in 2022 of yachts being seized along with everything on them. These moves, while angering the oligarchs, directed much of their ire and fury at Putin directly, who wouldn't have dealt these blows had the country not invaded. After these actions, and as the war went on, many would grow silent due to fear of reprisal from Russian government officials, but also due to the helplessness of their situation, with recent comments publicly made by one of the heads of the main group, in which they are all a part of. Cracks are once again starting to show themselves in the light. Since the Ukrainian war began in 2022, 64 oligarchs have died in mysterious circumstances. The largest death toll took place during the initial invasion in 2022, when opposition was fiercest to the war. Of those 64, 38 are the most scrutinized and looked at as conspiratorial deaths. The deaths are likely tied to opposition to Putin in most cases. While it is likely for most, it is most commonly theorized to be that due to the war, Russia came to reclaim its money, and when they discovered most of the oligarchs had embezzled it for their own interests, that is when they had their mysterious death. With this all being the case, for anyone to come out and say something negative while being in a position of wealth and power to Russia to an extent takes a level of bravery, or rather desperation, due to the severity of the circumstances they find themselves in. Russia's central bank governor, Elvira Nabiullina, back in June, specifically June 20th, warned when few others dared defy the narrative that the momentum that Russia has experienced for its wartime situation with Ukraine was starting to fade.
Russia has forces surrounding Ukraine now from three different sides.
In retrospect, this moment was likely a key turning point in the future economic situations, such as where we are now. She also pointed out that a key issue was the depletion of Russia's national wealth fund, which was their emergency fund. Essentially, that kept this war going as long as it has. With it now so low, nearly depleted, an economic crash is fastly approaching, and this was prior to the mass oil refinery strikes or the Ukrainians' promise to black out Moscow. Things would then escalate in July when more officials began to contradict the official narrative that Russian President Vladimir Putin was constantly conveying, that that Russia would be fine, survive this period, and its economy would remain resilient. Many are saying that Russia is facing a future terrible 2026 outcome, and with it now being October, the reality seems to be coming to pass as Russia stays its course in the war. 30.4%, or about 1/3 of Russian companies, have reported record losses of their companies, down to COVID-19 levels, or some outright into levels below even that. That gives oligarchs justification to speak out now, as their businesses are on the verge of complete collapse. Should this trend continue, things will only continue down a spiraling path for all of Russia. As we had reported previously, there were talks of raising taxes further in Russia as a result of the Ukrainian war and the situation Russia was in. That has come to pass now, as the VAT tax has gone up 2%, putting it at 22% rate, which was on top of other taxes that had been raised earlier. The Russian State Duma, which is the lower house of the Federal Assembly of Russia, had increased business taxes across the board, alongside various other taxes as well. The basic corporate profit tax rate has been increased from 20% to 25%. Moreover, on top of this, industry-specific rates have now come to apply. For example, IT companies will pay an additional 5% until 2030. Gambling falls under the same rate, and as does tourism, but with tourism, it will only increase by 1% up to 5% by 2029. Inflation has skyrocketed in Russia as a result of the war, the sanctions, and their worsening energy and food sectors. Officially, it is listed at about 10% as a rate, but unofficially, it is thought to be as high as 20 to 25%. In Sochi, Putin said that most of the taxes that had not even been fully raised yet would be used to fix and improve the infrastructure of the country. However, many believe instead it's going to be used to fix the refinery and also for the massive elephant in the room, which is that of war efforts in Ukraine. That has led to a loathing and distrust of the use of the taxes that Russia is taking from its citizens. This is especially bad for the oligarchs, who are being drained directly by Russia in backroom deal. In Russia, Roskomnadzor, which is the censorship organization in Russia, essentially has now required users of Telegram to give them administration rights if they live in the country, specifically targeting larger scale personalities at the moment, but this could and likely will escalate to the average person as time goes on. Telegram is famous for its level of protection for privacy and security, so much so that it's even used in warlike scenarios for quick data sharing and messaging. This leaves a hole for Russian citizens to express their discontent, one which Russia seems unwilling to continue to allow, as it's losing grip on the narrative that their war is all fine and they are in position of strength. Russia has sentenced 2 people every day to prison for the crimes of espionage and treason, with a rate of 100% guilty. The totals are those of 232 people persecuted between January and June. This means that with 117 working days in that period, Russian courts average nearly 2 guilty sentences a day. This number has only continued up until now, meaning that people are being imprisoned and punished in mass. The sentencing severity of these crimes in many people's eyes is seen now as disproportionate to the crime actually committed. A man wearing a pro-Ukrainian t-shirt, for example, was sentenced to a longer prison sentence than a person who had poisoned an entire population in Russia. People who have disagreements with the government face harsher sentences than people who commit more intense crimes in the country, and many are starting to notice. As this all occurs, Ukraine is continuing its bombardment of Russia with the stated goal of blacking out all of Moscow. At the rate things are going, they very well might achieve that goal, or at the very least take out the economy itself. The situation is a massive shift from where many US-centric viewers thought we'd be, as peace talks seemed right around the corner, but with the situation worsening to such a degree, it is no wonder US interests now think Ukraine very well might have it within themselves to take back all their territory, potentially even Crimea. While this is a long shot, Russia is actively in a bad situation right now, and it's running out of time. If it doesn't do something soon, the war could end. As things worsen for Russia, the fated time might soon be approaching as the year's end approaches. Time will tell, and we'll continue to keep you updated as the situation continues to develop.